After the inexcusable mess that was Resident Evil 6's story, we all deserve something much, much better at this point, and luckily for us, next up is Resident Evil 7, which, well, to say the very least, is definitely much, much better. The 2017 survival horror title reinvented the franchise and served as a soft reboot, though it was still following up on the established RE universe rather than wiping the slate clean. It was also a bit of a clean break with a completely new story focused on new characters and without any of the baggage of prior titles weighing things down. That, of course, means that for once, we don't have a ton of backstory to go through before we jump right into the thick of things. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Without further ado, here's the full story of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Now, before we dive in, this video is based on our understanding of Resident Evil 7's story and lore, and reflects our interpretation of its events as a refresher before Resident Evil Requiem. As always, we recommend that you make your own informed call by looking into the game yourself and ensuring that it matches your expectations, standards, and personal values. And also, just a heads up before we dive in, this is a newly edited, expanded, and restructured version of our earlier recap, now presented in 4K at 60 FPS. This entire recap series also includes coverage of Outbreak, Outbreak File Number 2, Umbrella Chronicles, and Darkside Chronicles. Those are entries that we didn't include the first time around. So with that out of the way, we're going to get started. The setting. RE7 is set in the year 2017, and unusually, serving as its protagonist isn't an established character with years of experience fighting against nightmarish monsters, but instead a regular, vanilla everyman in the form of Ethan Winters. 3 years ago, Ethan's wife Mia left on what was supposedly just a regular babysitting job, but it wasn't long afterwards that she disappeared entirely off the face of the planet and was presumed dead. As RE7 kicks off though, Ethan receives a message from her. Apparently she is still alive, and wants him to get her at a place called the Baker Residence, deep in the swamps of Dulvey, Louisiana. Desperate to find his wife, Ethan heads over to Dulvey immediately, but upon arriving at the Baker residence, he quickly realizes that things are about to take a grisly turn. Almost instantly, he's welcomed by corpses of animals, both whole and in pieces, all over the place, as well as a rundown and decaying mansion that looks like it's been plucked out of a horror movie. With trepidation, Ethan explores the house, and it doesn't take long for him to successfully locate Mia, who, much to his shock and relief, is still alive, but unfortunately is far from well. Mia feels distant and unrecognizable, drifting in and out of awareness as she rambles to Ethan about things that make no sense. Her words sound detached from reality, as though she's trapped in some nightmare that he cannot see. Then, without warning, her behavior shifts from unsettling to outright terrifying. She attacks him with shocking force, moving with strength that seems impossible. Ethan tries to defend himself, but the encounter turns savage. She drives a screwdriver through his hand, slams him into walls, and relentlessly pursues him throughout the house. When he attempts to fight back, the violence only escalates. In the chaos, Ethan is forced to pull the trigger. When Mia finally collapses, the reality of what he's done hits him immediately, and regret washes over him almost at once. He barely has a moment to process any of it. An elderly man suddenly ambushes him, greets him with a chilling welcome to the family, and knocks him unconscious with a single brute punch. Things take an ever more horrifying turn when Ethan then comes to. The horror intensifies. When he wakes up, he finds himself tied to a chair and sitting at a dinner table, with his decapitated hand somehow having been reattached. And he's not alone. Also sitting at the table is almost the entirety of the Baker family. Jack Baker, who is the old man who punched and knocked out Ethan earlier, Jack's wife, Marguerite, their son, Lucas, and an old woman in a wheelchair. Horrifyingly, the Bakers seem to be enjoying a meal of human flesh and guts, and are more than a little insistent that Ethan partakes as well. The nightmarish scene is cut short, however, when the house's doorbell rings and the Bakers all leave the scene to investigate. The chaos gives Ethan a narrow window to run. He pushes deeper into the house, desperate to find any possible exit from the nightmare that he stumbled into. Not long after, a landline phone rings. On the other end is Zoe Baker. Unlike the rest of the family, she sounds calm and lucid. Zoe explains that the Bakers have been infected by a new strain of virus that's warped their minds and granted them disturbing regenerative abilities. The infection has spread beyond just the family. A thick black mold has overtaken the estate itself, creeping along walls and floors, while grotesque creatures formed from the same substance roam the corridors. These beings are called the Molded, and they hunt anything that moves. Zoe insists that there is still hope. A serum exists that can neutralize the mold's effects, but it must be created first. The necessary ingredients are scattered across the property, meaning Ethan will have to search the estate to gather them. Once completed, the old serum could cure Zoe and Mia. And yes, Mia survived and she remains infected. With no better option and everything to lose, Ethan agrees. If synthesizing the serum offers even a chance to save Mia and escape the Baker estate, it is a risk he's willing to take. Ethan spends a significant chunk of Resident Evil 7 from that point exploring the Baker residence in his attempt to find the components for the serum. And in that time, he comes up against not only scores of the Molded, but Jack Baker as well. Empowered and malformed by the virus, Jack proves to be more than a formidable foe in each fight. And though each time Ethan manages to survive and defeat his adversary, Jack just keeps coming back, stronger and more deformed than before. In a nutshell, he seems unkillable. Tracking down the serum ingredients forces Ethan into another deadly confrontation, this time with Marguerite Baker. The infection has twisted her into something monstrous, granting her control over swarms of enormous insects that pour from the walls and the ceilings at her command. The fight is exhausting and vicious, but Ethan ultimately brings her down. With Marguerite dead, he finally secures the remaining components required to create the serum. Before he can act on that progress, Lucas intervenes. He abducts both Zoe and Mia and forces Ethan into a sadistic gauntlet designed like a nightmarish escape room, packed with lethal traps and cruel puzzles. Ethan barely survives the ordeal, managing to push through each obstacle, but Lucas slips away before a final confrontation can happen. As if that was not enough, Jack Baker returns in a grotesque, heavily mutated form. The battle that follows is even more desperate than before. With no other option, Ethan uses one of the two completed serums on Jack, seemingly ending him for good. The threat is finally neutralized, but the victory comes at a cost. Ethan now holds only a single remaining dose of the serum. The big decision. It's at this point that Ethan finally meets with both Mia and Zoe, and players are presented with a choice. Use the serum to cure either Mia or Zoe. We are, of course, going to stick with the canon choice for the purposes of this recap, and of course, the canon choice is to use the serum on Mia. After all, finding and rescuing his wife is why Ethan is here in Dulvey in the first place. After administering the serum, Ethan climbs into a small boat with Mia, tells Zoe that he's going to send help back for her, and leaves with his wife. Their escape, however, does not go as planned. Things rarely do in the Resident Evil universe. Ethan and Mia's boat chances upon the wreckage of a tanker named the Annabelle in the swamps, and they're attacked by the Molded once again. Their boat is destroyed, the two of them wash up on the ship's wreckage, and Ethan is taken captive by the Molded. At this point, the game shifts perspective, putting players in Mia's boots, and here, Resident Evil 7 finally begins offering answers for some of its biggest mysteries, because as Mia explores the ship in search for Ethan, her memories start returning to her, with the fog of the last 3 years and her mold infection finally beginning to clear. The truth. Mia is not just some unlucky civilian who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Behind Ethan's back, she had a very different life. She is a trained operative, working for a covert group called The Connections. Like so many clandestine factions in the Resident Evil world, they are deeply invested in developing bioweapons. At some point, the Connections engineered a new kind of weapon, one that could produce the black mold and the creatures born from it, while also exerting psychological control over its targets. To make the asset easier to move and less suspicious, they packaged it in the form of a little girl. The designation was E001. The name was Evelyn. Evelyn, however, was never a clean success. Keeping her looking like a normal child required constant chemical maintenance, and her mind was dangerously unstable. She fixated on the idea of having a family and did not simply want one in the emotional sense. She wanted one in the literal sense, forcing bonds and obedience through her abilities whenever reality did not match her fantasy. And that's where Mia's disappearance really begins. The job Ethan believed was a routine assignment from years earlier was anything but. Mia, along with another Connections agent, was assigned to escort Evelyn to a concealed lab in Central America aboard a ship called the Annabelle. The plan fell apart during a hurricane. In the middle of a storm, Evelyn's powers erupted. The crew was wiped out, leaving only Evelyn and Mia alive, because Mia was the one person Evelyn refused to let go. Evelyn did not want her dead. She wanted her to be mom. The madness back home. The ship crashed in the swamps of Dulvey, Louisiana, the same ship that Ethan and Mia just chanced upon, where Evelyn and Mia were found by the Baker family. Completely unsuspecting of Evelyn's true nature, the Bakers took Evelyn and Mia in, only for Evelyn to turn her powers on the family, driving them to insanity and forcing mutations in their bodies. So what happened? We learn about these events in the Daughters DLC. When Jack puts Evelyn in Lucas's room and sends Zoe Baker for clothes, then lightning kills the power and the girl is suddenly gone. Zoe searches and finds Marguerite Baker rambling in the bathroom, until she turns vicious and Jack has to control her. When Zoe comes back with rope, Jack is trying to drown Marguerite, then stabs himself like it's nothing, before dragging Lucas Baker away. Marguerite claims voices in her head and gives Zoe the vehicle keys for escape and finds Mia lying. Beside her is a letter which tells her the truth about Evelyn. As soon as she turns around, she sees Evelyn in horror, leading her to lose her consciousness. She finds herself at the dining table as if nothing happened, as Evelyn calls her sister. Due to her knowledge about Evelyn, Zoe was able to resist her control and spent a long time witnessing her family's descent into complete chaos. And how crazy was this family really? Well, this is explained in the Banned Footage DLC. Clancy Jarvis, the American documentary Sewer Gators cameraman from RE7's VHS tapes, steps into the Baker nightmare when Andre Strickland and Peter Walken bring the crew to the estate in June 2017, expecting a haunted house shoot, but coming across Jack Baker instead. Andre and Peter are killed, while Clancy is dragged into the processing pit behind the main house. The nightmare tape scene is his first test, a long holdout where he scavenges guns, scrap, and tries to survive Jack and swarms of molded until morning. It doesn't matter. Marguerite snatches him soon after, cages him in the master bedroom, and keeps returning with mold-laced meals meant to turn him. In the bedroom tape, Clancy finally breaks the loop by stabbing her in the neck and slipping out through a concealed passage beneath the bed. Lucas ends the escape immediately, knocking him out and chaining his hand to a finger guillotine across from a sack-headed captive he calls Hoffman. The 21 tape sees Clancy forced by Lucas through a series of games that escalates from finger losses to rising electric shocks to a closing buzzsaw, with Lucas even puppeteering Hoffman's body to prolong the game until Clancy survives and Hoffman is killed. Lucas, amused rather than finished, drags Clancy off for more games. And the main story tapes later confirm that he ultimately dies in one of Lucas's barn death traps. Anyways, back to the main topic at hand. Over time, Evelyn was able to stabilize her physical form without the need of her regular chemical doses, but by the time that happened, she had rapidly aged to the point of needing a wheelchair to move around and looking like a feeble old woman, the same one that Ethan saw at the dinner table earlier in the game. Lucas, the uninfected. Interestingly, out of the entire Baker family, the one who is uninfected is Lucas. You see, at a certain point after Evelyn's arrival at the Baker residence, unbeknownst to Evelyn, Lucas was contacted by the Connections, who immunized him and brought him aboard in exchange for him observing Evelyn and providing data on her. But we'll get back to Lucas in a bit. For now, let's focus on Ethan and Mia. The latter makes her way through the wrecked ship, finding a tissue sample of Evelyn, and ultimately succeeds in finding and rescuing Ethan. Handing him Evelyn's tissue sample, she tells her husband that with its help, he can compose a necrotoxin that can be used to defeat and kill Evelyn. Mia chooses to stay behind and combat Evelyn's ongoing attempts to control her mind, while Ethan decides to head back to the Baker residence to deal with the bioweapon once and for all. Chris Redfield returns. Ethan's final confrontation with Evelyn ends with him landing the injection of the necrotoxin, but she refuses to go down quietly. In a last violent surge, she mutates into an enormous mold-born abomination, a mass so vast it seems to swallow the Baker estate whole. Ethan is completely outmatched until a helicopter arrives at the last possible moment, deploying soldiers who help him finish the fight and bring Evelyn down for good. The twist is who is leading that team. It is Chris Redfield, a veteran agent of the BSAA. Once Evelyn is destroyed, Ethan is pulled to safety and brought aboard the chopper, where he finds Mia alive as well. With the nightmare finally behind him, the helicopter lifts off and the two escape Dulvey together. That closes the main story of Resident Evil 7, but the DLC expands what happens next. Not a Hero shifts the focus to Chris. Several years after the events of Resident Evil 6, he's still operating as a BSAA agent, but the Dulvey mission has him working alongside a new group called Blue Umbrella. It's a private military outfit created to contain bioterror incidents and clean up the fallout tied to Umbrella's legacy. Chris is there for one primary target, Lucas Baker. The goal is to capture and interrogate him, uncover more about the connections, and shut down the operation behind Evelyn. Lucas complicates everything by cutting ties with everyone and planning to auction off his mold research to the highest bidder. By the time Chris corners him, Lucas is already close to closing a deal with an unknown buyer. Chris does not let that happen. He tracks Lucas down and kills him before the sale can even be completed. Zoe's fate. Meanwhile, there's End of Zoe, which, as its name suggests, focuses on Zoe Baker, who is found and rescued in the swamps by Joe Baker, Jack's brother, who's been living the life of a hermit in the swamps, and has as much managed to escape the infection that tore the Baker family apart. End of Zoe sees Joe's attempts to cure and help Zoe, while also going up against and finally killing Jack Baker, who's not only still alive, but has also mutated further still into a creature known as the Swamp Man. True to his promise, Ethan reveals to Chris about helping Zoe. Chris reaches her, and Zoe thanks Ethan for keeping his word. And that's the full story of Resident Evil 7. When we return for part 17 of our full Resident Evil recap, we're going to talk about Resident Evil Village, which continues the story of the Winters family.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.